Look at her, all kicked up, relaxed, and chilling. Ah, man, I love Tulsi Gabbard. I think she's fantastic. The other night, actually, last 2 nights, the Democratic Party had their debates. Well, the first round of debates. And, well, it's a boring process. I'm not a huge fan of any other candidate out there, but the media is going to push who they want to push. And one of the things that I find funny is just how underplayed Tulsi's candidacy is. Even in criticism, you'll find people, criticizing Booker and Warren and Biden. But when it comes to Tulsi, she's just right there under the radar doing her thing. So she released this video on Twitter, and let's watch it. Because this is about her in the debate. Let's go. Oh, let's go.
I feel good. Just getting caught up on the news, and I'm going to head over to the debate venue and get ready for tonight.
Congresswoman Gabbard,
yes.
Way in here.
Donald Trump and his cabinet, Mike Pompeo, John Bolton, and others, are creating a situation that just a spark would light off a war with Iran. We are no better off in Afghanistan today than we were when this war began.
So how do you not love her? I'm just confused. Like, how is it just not? Oh my goodness, this is fantastic, because her entire thing is foreign affairs. She's former military. I've actually gone over all the reasons why I like her in a previous video, so I'm not going to be boring you guys with all of that. But when it comes to her presence and and what she's speaking about, and as far as the situation with Iran, these are things that really do matter, and this is her strength.
This is why it's so important to have a president and commander-in-chief who knows the cost of war and who's ready to do the job on day one. I am ready to do that job when I walk into the Oval Office. Thank you very much.
Listen, I'm going to go down.
Why were you the lone voice out there going after the neocons, going after the people that took us into these wars?
Our voices are being heard from north to south and east to west, but
that's the thing. She's coming alive in it. Hopefully she continues to build this momentum, because this is the type of conversation that we need. I still do not see her beating Trump. I don't see anybody beating Trump in 2020. But definitely her message is one that just needs to be spread, which is one of the reasons why I guess I'm doing these videos, because she really is on point when it comes to this.
this is only the beginning. We cannot be complacent. If you're hyped and you're excited and you're happy about how tonight went, we got to push forward. We got this.
Yeah, and shoot, been in those rooms before. I just hate when it comes crashing down around us. But you see, there's tons of support from the people. Hands down, my favorite part of the debate. Love how you destroyed Tim Ryan. That's fun stuff. Let's see what she's been tweeting us since. Mom, come on, always have to do the money ask. Too many politicians think the only way the U.S. can be engaged with other countries is by blowing them up and strangling them with economic sanctions. I will end long-standing regime change policy and lead with a foreign policy based on negotiations, diplomacy, and cooperation.
Should be going into communities here at home.
Let's start this one from the top. Oh.
In which children born after 9/11 will be able to vote, which is bewildering to those of us who lived through it. During last night's debate, Congressman Tim Ryan of Ohio said it's America's duty to keep fighting in Afghanistan for some reason, 18 years after we toppled the Taliban. That turned out to be a mistake. Tulsi Gabbard, the only...
Hey, if you remember the Vox Apocalypse video, the guy who started that whole deal, his name, Chris Mazza, right? I think that's his name. In his bio, he calls Tucker Carlson a white supremacist. Now, they say what you want about Tucker Carlson. I personally, I like a lot of his work. I don't agree with him on everything, but I do like a lot of his work. And even he, over here on Fox, actually one of the biggest names in news, is sitting here saying, yeah, she's the voice of reason at this debate. And that was fantastic.
Veteran on stage corrected him. Watch this.
Is that what you will tell the parents of those 2 soldiers who were just killed in Afghanistan? Well, we just have to be engaged. As a soldier, I will tell you that answer is unacceptable. We have to bring our troops
Who?
home from Afghanistan. We are in a place in Afghanistan where we have lost so many lives. We've spent so much money that's coming out of every one of our pockets, money that should be going into communities here at home, meeting the needs of the people here at home. We are no better off in Afghanistan today than we were when this war began.
All obvious points, none of which you're allowed to say out loud in Washington. Now, they make Congresswoman Tulsi Gabbard seem like basically an untouchable. She is not allowed to get the kind of coverage that the rest of the Democratic candidates get.
That's why we're here.
But the viewers loved it. At the debate, Gabbard's was the most searched name online. Tulsi Gabbard of Hawaii joins us tonight. Aloha, Congresswoman Gabbard.
Aloha, Tucker.
So I couldn't help but notice, and I'm sure you don't want to play the victim
I just want to give her a hug.
in this, but that you had, despite the fact that you won a number of online polls, you had the most Google searches, your name after the debate, you got some of the fewest minutes to speak of any of the 10 candidates on stage, and you were the only one who was essentially attacked personally by the moderators. Why do you think that was?
Look, it shows that there's a clear bias in place. I made the most of every minute that I had. Wish I had the opportunity to have more time to address these important issues. But I want to just point out something from that clip that you played that I think is really important, where we hear a lot of politicians say this same argument that, well, we've got to stay engaged in the world, otherwise we'll be isolationists, as though the only way the United States can engage with other countries is by blowing them up or strangling them with economic sanctions.
Okay, so, but that's the thing. I mean, I love you, Tulsi. I really do. But you have to strong arm in a lot of cases, or they'll take advantage of us. It was one of the issues that I think Barack Obama really had a huge problem with, was that balance of diplomacy or going hard. You know, I mean, you can't always rock with the soft hand, because, you know, that how do I put it? My dad used to say a hard head makes for a soft ass, right? So a lot of people, and I think countries, if they see an opportunity to take advantage, they will, which is one of the reasons why we can't just be all hugs and kisses and all that other stuff. So there is a balance that needs to be struck. But I think that, you know, President Trump does strike that balance rather well. He negotiates fantastically. You see what happened with Mexico. You see what happens with a lot of these other countries. I mean, heck, when it comes to the EU and Britain trying to do Brexit, right? Like, Trump offered them to a trading partner. He said, hey, come trade with us in the US. But their leadership at the time was very against it. So when it comes to that, I really do see that being a very fine line to walk. But if anybody could walk it with grace and style, it'd definitely be Tulsi.
Smashing them and trying to overthrow their governments. This is exactly what's wrong with this whole premise and the whole view with which too many politicians, too many leaders in this country are viewing the United States' role in the world. How about the United States be a leader in the world, work out differences and build relationships with negotiations and diplomacy and finding common interests and seeing how we can work together so that we can stop sending our men and women in uniform into harm's way, serving in missions that do not serve the interests of the American people, that make our country less safe and actually end up causing more harm and more damage to the people in the countries where we wage these wasteful regime change wars. That's the kind of change in leadership that I'm seeking to bring as president.
You just mentioned sanctions. You're not questioning the ironclad bipartisan consensus in Washington that sanctions against Iran are morally righteous and can never be withdrawn, are you?
I am. Absolutely. I think that...
Honestly, that's one of the things that I like the most about her, is that one of the main things that got her on my radar was her denunciation of the DNC's treatment of Bernie Sanders. And we see it right now. You know, we saw it happening during Bernie Sanders' campaign, and it's one of the reasons why now he's having a hard time regaining that same type of momentum, is because we saw you bend the knee. Now, I don't want to see her bend the knee by any stretch of the imagination. And I wouldn't think something along the lines of her serving as Secretary of State or anything else like that, even during a Trump administration, would be her bending the knee. It would be her doing what she felt she needed to do. But as far as the way the DNC is set up and I guess the big money always wins in the end. Okay, so we got a limited amount of time with her in the national spotlight right now, and we should really appreciate it, because you hear what she's kicking. She's more than willing to stand up to those in power and, you know, do her best.
This is one of the things that is leading us closer and closer to a war with Iran, a war that would be far more devastating than anything that we saw in the war in Iraq. I served in Iraq in 2005 in a medical unit, and this was the height of the Iraq war. There were lots of American casualties almost every day, and I was confronted with that high, terrible human cost of war.
And what drove us into Iraq? What drove us into Afghanistan? I mean, these are questions that have yet to be answered. These are situations and, you know, lies that have yet to be accounted for. But, you know, that's just the way Washington works. It's so easy to blind people and to get them distracted with other things that, you know, you look up 15, 20 years later and we're all asking, well, wait, what was the truth behind that? And I'm not sure. I know we got nuggets here and there, but as far as full truth, well, more than likely we'll never know.
A war with Iran would make that war with Iraq look like a picnic. Escalating these crippling sanctions, withdrawing from the Iran nuclear deal, designating Iran's military as a terrorist organization, something unprecedented, and continuing to deploy more and more U.S. troops. The neocons in the Trump administration and Saudi Arabia and Netanyahu have created a situation where it's going to be very difficult for President Trump to avoid a war with Iran.
Can I ask a question here? Like, neocons, neoliberals, can we just call them neos instead? Like, whether it's a neocon or a neoliberal, it seems as if that term applies to those who are war hungry, militaristic, capitalistic type, that crowd who would put, you know, the possibility of a good war ahead of our soldiers and, you know, basically any and everything else. That's what it really feels like that is. And it's just neoconservative or neoliberal. It's all the same thing. It's all a cash before, you know, to everybody else, everybody and everything else.
Build all the building blocks, place the dynamite, and lit the fuse. And it's going to be up to Donald Trump and his leadership whether or not he is going to cut that fuse and say, hey, we need to get back on track and put the interests of the American people and our country first and avoid a war with Iran, get back into that Iran nuclear agreement.
See, that's exactly why I say I'd like to have her in his ear. You know, like, that's why I wouldn't consider, her going and working for the Trump administration, bending the knee, because I'd like to have her in his ear. Like, definitely always want to keep a nice, sweet voice of reason near you, you know? So I can't help but feel like we are reaching the end of this video of the Tucker Carlson thing. And, you know, I think this has run on long enough. So, so with that being said, all the internet stuff. Like it if you liked it, sub if you enjoy my fantastic voice. Share, because sharing is caring. And speak. Let me know. What do you think? Who else do you like? Is there really any? Give me your best arguments for president or Secretary of State. You know, whatever. Let me know what you think in the comments. And until the next video.